So we are continuing with Kingdom Plantae. This week we're talking physiology instead of anatomy. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are the three things that plants absolutely need to survive, to thrive, to grow, and to live? And those three things are water, nutrients, and sunlight. Obviously, they don't need any one of those three things all the time. They don't need sunlight at night. They don't need nutrients during the germination phase, and they can go without water for a short period of time. But to continue to live and thrive versus survive, they do need water, soil or nutrients, and here we have what's the water for? What do we need water for with plants? That is, we need it for photosynthesis. Water is part of that process. Plants take in carbon dioxide, and with water, they use sunlight to make glucose and oxygen. They use water for maintaining turgor pressure, for maintaining that uprightness for fluid flow. They use water for hydrolysis, for changing chemistry within the cells of the plant. And then they use water, obviously, for transport, for both movement of xylem from the roots up and movement of nutrients down through the phloem. So water essential for the life of a plant. Speaking of movement, unlike movement of water in the plant, plants do move. That is a different type of movement. This particular one is called nastic movement. Nastic movement is a plant's response to a stimulus such that the direction or action is pre-programmed and not dependent on the action of the stimulus. So when a plant folds up at night, for example, or if a plant like a fly trap folds as a result of a surface stimulus, or whether a plant folds up because it's nighttime, those are called nastic movements, unlike movements that are a result of a response to sunlight, to gravity, etc. So nastic movement is pre-programmed, is not dependent on a direct stimulus or a response. Some examples, I'm hiding some of those examples. Turgor pressure, wilt, touch sensitive, temperature, light. So tropism is the alternative to that, right? That is the turning of a plant or a movement of a plant in a particular direction. So this is not pre-programmed, it's in a response to external stimulus. So phototropism would be an example of that, and gravitropism. So phototropism, the plant moving toward light, and gravitropism, a plant responding to gravity and growing in such a direction that that grows up against gravity. Speaking of that fly trap, let's talk about insectivorous plants real quick. These plants, very unique in the plant kingdom, and certainly unique to the plant kingdom too. You're not going to find them elsewhere. But insectivorous plants, what do they use insects for? Why do they trap insects? They use it for nutrients, not for because they're growing in nutrient-sparse areas. So by using insects as nutrient sources, these plants can grow in areas where plants typically couldn't grow because there wouldn't be enough nutrient in the soil, for example. So they're still getting water, and they're getting a few other things from their surroundings, and certainly sunlight. They're getting their energy from sunlight. They're not getting fuel from the insect, though. They're not getting, for example, glucose. They're still going to make glucose through photosynthesis, but they're getting some of those minerals, for example, that might be present in soil usually that aren't present in the soil that they are where they are present. So nutrients, minerals, that's what they're after. They still make glucose through photosynthesis. How about water absorption in plants? The type of soil that a plant is in has a significant impact on how well it grows. So there are 4 types of soil: gravel, sand, silt, and clay. Types of inorganic material in soil, I guess would be the more appropriate way to say it, because the soil is made of organic material and inorganic. So here we're talking about the inorganic material: gravel, sand, silt, and clay. You can see, let me highlight that here real quick so you can see those over here: gravel, sand, silt, and clay. And it's the space between them that is the most important thing. That pore space right here, pore space, spaces in the soil that determine how much water and air a soil can hold. Now, if a soil has too many pores, a pore space is too large, like gravel, air and water can flow through a little bit too quickly, and the plant can struggle to stay hydrated. Whereas with clay, the opposite side, where that density and therefore those pore spaces is real small, the water can stay trapped in clay for so long that a plant with just a little bit of water can be almost waterlogged. It will drown. Plants can do that. They need a combination of air and water along with their nutrients. So now at the bottom here of the page is this term loam, also important. Now loam is a mixture of gravel, sand, silt, clay, and organic material. So most of the soil you would think of as like black topsoil is usually a combination of a loam. It's loam-like. And that's what plants are after. That's what they want. That's their sweet spot. All right, continuing with water and movement in plants, let's talk about the cohesion tension theory. That is the theory that's most commonly held as to how plants use water. So if we start at the top of this cycle, I'm covering one of these charts again. That's okay. We'll work our way through it. So with an assumption here, let's start with a simple assumption that with this tree that you see in the picture, that water is present in the tree. Okay, the water is present. That we have a relatively a wet environment or semi-wet environment. So water is present in the tree right now. Let's now start at the top. With that water being present throughout the tree, water is evaporating through the stomata of the leaves. You learned about that last week, right? The stomata. So water is evaporating through there. Now that evaporation of water moving out and tied with the cohesion of water molecules to one another by hydrogen bonds, that creates a water chain. And if you took chemistry with me last year, we talked about cohesion. In fact, if you had any of the physical science with me in years past, we've talked about cohesion of water and our ability to, for example, float a paperclip on the surface of water. That's because of water's cohesion, right? So the cohesion of water molecules to one another will create a water chain whereas if water is evaporating out of the leaf, because of that movement out by the water is going to pull other water molecules behind it up the tree through the xylem from the roots. And the roots are where the water's coming from, right? So there's water all around the roots here. And so that cohesion tension from water evaporating from the leaves is pulling water into the roots and then up the tree through the xylem. and then eventually out the leaf. That's the cohesion tension theory. Now, because of that, those stomata, they do close. When they close, they will prevent water loss. They do this during dry times, for example, when there's not a lot of water present. They may do it at night also, or if carbon dioxide levels are high. So those guard cells will close the stomata. When the stomata are open, CO2 is taken up. Water is evaporating also because of that, though. But the leaves take up CO2, and along with water and sunlight, they make glucose, and then that nutrient is transported down the phloem of the plant, or more specifically, as you see here in the term, translocated down the plant. Now, cohesion, the definition of cohesion, the phenomenon that occurs when individual molecules are so strongly attracted to one another that they tend to stay together even when exposed to tension. So cohesion tension theory of water movement. We're certainly talking about water here. And translocation, that's the process by which, again, organic substances move through the phloem of plants. So if you were asked, does translocation happen in the xylem or the phloem? The answer is phloem. Cohesion tension of water, where does that happen? That happens in the xylem, because that's moving up against gravity, right? Right. All right, plant growth. Now, plant growth happens in the meristematic tissue. You saw that in the last module, those slides, where the meristematic tissue is in the plant. And that plant growth happens via mitosis, cellular cloning, essentially, cellular division. And that plant growth does require hormones, just like your growth requires hormones in your body, testosterone, for example, or estrogen, as well as growth hormones. Insulin is a hormone. We've learned about those. There are hormones in plants, too, chemicals that circulate throughout any multicellular organism that regulate cellular processes by interacting with specific target cells. And you can see over here to the chart to your left what the hormones are in plants. So we have gibberellin, auxin, cytokines, ethylene, and abscisic acid. So if we start from the bottom, the abscisic acid is the most specific. Abscisic acid is responsible for abscission, which we learned about last week, the plants losing their leaves, and for seeds going dormant. So seed goes dormant so that it can store it over the winter in nature and sprout in the summer. We as humans take advantage of that seed dormancy also by putting seeds away for the winter in a dark, dry place and then planting them in the ground in the summer. Ethylene is used as a hormone that's responsible for flowering, for fruit development. Also is a factor in abscission of leaves. So it's really a hormone that's used for maturing. So a plant matures. As a plant matures, it's making more ethylene. In fact, if you take an unripe banana and you put it in a bag, that ethylene will it off gases from the banana. So bananas give off a gas, and ethylene is that gas. And if you put a banana in a bag, it'll ripen faster because the ethylene is now compounding. There's more of it in that small little ecosystem of the plastic bag that you put the banana in, and that's what is causing that banana to ripen. And it does that for any fruit. You just notice it more with bananas. Cytokines are also maturity-based hormones, growth and maturity of the plant, though, instead of just the flower or the fruit, but it is a factor in the flower and the fruit maturity as well. So cytokines used for plant growth and maturity, as well as the flower and the fruit, where ethylene is used for flower, fruit, maturity, and eventually dormancy of the plant. And then we have auxin, essentially the same processes as cytokines. And then gibberellin. Gibberellin is the hormone that is unique to germination. So if you were asked which hormone is most influential in germinating a plant, that would be gibberellin.